Hey, it's Nick, also known as Ablazeolive from Golden Guardians, and today I'm doing a Ryze champion guide.
You won't win this!
I like playing Ryze because he has a lot of skill expression in the way you play the map, and he has a lot of hitting combos that, if you execute well, really elevate the champion from being very bad to being very, very strong. I think he has a lot of potential that a lot of people don't see, and that's why he's such a powerful pick in pro play so often. More people should be playing Ryze. He may not have the best win rate, but I think he's one of the most fun champions you can play. He has an incredible ability to carry the game, and he can really turn around fights that are seemingly lost.
As Ablazeolive is here in a 1v3, he'll do his best to try to win it. Hansawa wants to get away, but a beautiful bounce for the kill. The fumble don't matter. Ablazeolive just smears him into the ground.
Starting off with Keystone Runes, the two options that you can be looking for are Phase Rush and Unsealed Spellbook, and they have different functions, and I'll start off with the Phase Rush and go through the whole tree. This is the Keystone you'll take most of the time. So you want to take Mana Flow Band because mana obviously has incredible value on Ryze, and you also want to take Celerity and Water Walking in the Sorcery tree. Now, the reason you take Celerity and Water Walking are the flat AP you get from Absolute Focus isn't that valuable, and Transcendence gives a very small amount of ability haste, so it's not that beneficial, and the reducing remaining cooldowns of basic abilities is really ineffectual on Ryze because his cooldowns are so short anyway. It's kind of the same thing with Water Walking. Flat AP from Gathering Storm isn't as effective, and Scorch you don't use very often in lane, and Water Walking is actually really nice because you often want to roam on Ryze, and that just synergizes really well with Celerity as well. And for secondary runes, you almost always want to go Time Warp Tonic and Biscuits. This just really helps your laning phase. It gives you move speed to catch up people that don't have this rune, and Biscuits really helps you with your mana. Also gives you extra mana, which is really nice on Ryze. And especially in the early game, you can run out of mana if there's a fight, so having these extra Biscuits is really valuable. The reason you would take Summoner Spellbook is if you're in like a very difficult lane, and instead of going like the Sorcery Tree secondary, you would want to go the Resolve Tree secondary, but you still want to pick up the Biscuits and Time Warp Tonic. So if you're going Unsealed Spellbook, you usually want to go Perfect Timing because you want to pick up boots early on Ryze so that you can get roams off. And when you're in one of these hard lanes, it can be hard for either you get poked a lot or they have like a burst combo. So if you're going to get poked a lot, Second Wind is more valuable. And if you are going to get like bursted, say you're against like a LeBlanc, then Bone Plating is really valuable. If the enemy team has a lot of value from Tenacity, then Unflinching is a no-brainer. Otherwise, you can just go Overgrowth for the free HP. And in terms of stat shards, I think if you have a very easy lane, then you can generally go attack speed and AP with either armor or magic resist, depending on if your opponent's AD or AP. If you're in a hard lane, then you can also go double magic resist. I think going double armor is very unnecessary in almost every lane, but I think if you're against something like a Syndra or like a LeBlanc, double magic resist is definitely something you should consider because AP on Ryze isn't that valuable because he throws so many spells and goes like a more tanky build where he doesn't get a lot of AP anyway. So getting this early stat shard isn't a huge detriment to your damage because you're still going to be able to kill people and play out the map very well. For summoner spells on Ryze, you're going to take Flash every single time, always. Flash is just super OP, everyone takes it. And Teleport 99% of the time. I think there's a case to be made that sometimes Ghost is better than Teleport. And you would want to take Ghost in a game where you can't split push because the enemy has like a really strong split pusher and you're going to be team fighting a lot. You want to be able to chase them down a lot easier with your lane being really safe. I think it's a lot greedier than Teleport, but I think there's definitely situations where you could go Ghost. But I think Flash and Teleport you're going to take 99% of the time. My favorite Ryze skin? I think Ryze actually has so many good skins. I think there's a lot of really good options on Ryze, but I think my favorite skin is probably Ryze Greybeard. So on Ryze, depending on the lane you're in, you can actually start any of the abilities. I think more often than not, you're going to want to start your E And that's because it has the shortest cooldown, and you can use it to trade a lot more often. And it's guaranteed, unlike your Q, which does more damage but has a longer cooldown and is a skill shot. The reasons you would want to take other spells, you'd want to take W if you're not going to trade very often because your opponent will zone you out, and you just want to have like the fattest trade you can. It has the largest base damage of any of your spells, and it also has a slow. So it's also helpful if you're against something where you want to auto attack them a lot, because the slow will really help you get a lot more autos, which will be a lot more damage than any of your other abilities would be. You sometimes take Q in lanes where you're getting zoned like really hard level 1 and you can't even like walk up to the wave without taking a really bad trade. I think the biggest one for me in this matchup is like Lucian, but even against Lucian you can take W and E. I think it's a lot of preference, but I think E is almost always what you want to start on Ryze. For skill max order on Ryze, you always want to max Q, and then you always want to max E, and then you always want to max W. Not really anything special to it. Your Q is your main damage spell, and your E resets your Q more, so there's really no situations where you wouldn't ever max Q and then E. In the past, that wasn't the case, but you max Q, E, and then W, and you get ult whenever you can. Your starting items in the game should be Corrupting Thought in every situation. That's part of the reason you take Corrupting Thought, is you have time over tonic. It allows you to push early really hard and not feel too worried about having to waste money on potions. Ryze's trading pattern very often involves him taking a lot of damage, so if you have to buy a lot of potions, it's really inefficient, and just getting a Corrupting Potion will be a lot of money saved overall in the long run. So for 3-item core on Ryze, it depends on whether you're going AP or tank Ryze. Currently, the tank Ryze build is really strong, and if this gets nerfed in the future, then potentially it becomes obsolete. But currently, it's like the best build, and it involves going Fimbulwinter or Everfrost first into Fimbulwinter, which is the tier tank item, into Frozen Heart. There's a lot of synergy there. Ryze gets a lot of value from mana, and Fimbulwinter gets you HP on mana. Frozen Heart gives you HP from mana and is a really efficient item. So it's a really strong 3-core and very cheap as well. If you're going the AP build, which might become good if these items get nerfed, then you'd go Seraphs instead. And in my opinion, you want to get a Zhonya's. Ryze, even when he's going the AP build, needs defensive stats. Otherwise, he's just going to get one shot. He's trying to stay in the fight for as long as possible. And without these defensive stats, it becomes really hard for him to fight optimally. For full 6-item builds on Ryze, it heavily depends on what your opposing team is, especially in the tank build, because whatever is killing you the most is going to be what you want to itemize against. Or if you're already tanky enough, you can just forego that and go more damage. So I think possible options for final build, including a Force of Nature and potentially like a Gargoyle Stoneplate. This was really common at one point. But also you can go Cosmic Drive, you can go Shadow Flame as well. You can even go like Void Staff. These are all possible options. It really heavily depends on what the opponent is. If you're mainly dying to AD damage, you can even consider like Randuin's. Anathema's Chains, I think, is a very underrated item. The tenacity reduction synergizes well with how much CC you have and how often you're going to be in the fight. On tank Ryze, there's a lot of options. You have to just think about what is most annoying to you and what is most obstructive to how you want to play team fights. Generally, along with the 3-core, you want to get a Force of Nature because it's an incredibly efficient magic resist item. And the 6th item really depends on your style and what you think is best in the game. For AP Ryze, it's a lot less open. On pretty much every AP build, you want to have a Death Cap and a Void Staff at some point. You didn't have those before in your first 3. You can decide to not get a Death Cap if you really want to, but generally speaking, when you're with this build, getting like a Banshees, for example, isn't gonna like make you that much tankier. You're already pretty squishy. It's generally just better to go the Death Cap and be a huge damage threat in the late game rather than go a hybrid tank AP build. I think it's better to generally just go full for the damage. For boots on Ryze, you're almost always going to be going either Ionian boots or Mercury treads or plated steel caps. You don't need the damage from sorcery shoes. CDR actually oftentimes gives you more damage because the way that your spells work is they're so cooldown gated, much more so than other champions, and having the extra cooldown, if you get another E, which is on a very short cooldown, it's way more damage than the sorcery shoes will ever provide. So I don't suggest going sorcerer shoes. I think Ionian boots is the very standard damage option if you want to be a damage player and don't need the defensive stats. But Ryze is one of the few champions that, because he has so much extra damage in his kit already and fights work, going defensive boots is not like a huge detriment and is often very strong. If there's a lot of value on the opposing team to have tenacity, Mercury Treads is a must. You're such a short range champion, and Mercs is so efficient in lane, especially if you're against a champion that really wants to CC you a lot. There are definitely some cases where I think you do need the armor, potentially against a Lucian, and the reducing incoming damage from basic attacks is also really helpful into some team composition. So if you have Ionian boots in the late game, maybe you want to swap them out for steel caps if you already have a ton of CDR and the 20 ability haste isn't that useful. Something that's underrated about Ionian boots for maybe newer players that they don't realize is that because it's cheaper, getting tier 2 boots is very important on Ryze. So it is very important to get your tier 2 boots early. You don't want to be finishing your full mythic item before tier 2 boots on Ryze specifically. You want to be getting your tier 2 boots usually pretty early, even before any of your mythic components sometimes. So that's a big reason why Ionian boots is a lot stronger as well compared to these other options. It's because it's the cheapest one. The way you want to play Ryze in the early game is generally your first plan is you want to try and get the tier base. So generally after 3 waves, you'll have enough gold to get your tier base, but that doesn't always mean that you want to base directly on your tier. You want to make sure your wave is in a good spot. Generally speaking, you won't have a lot of mana in the early game to like fight a lot. So I recommend being smart about how you use your mana and trying to essentially waste all of your mana right before you base to be as efficient as possible. Once you get your tier base, your options are going to go up a lot because you have a lot more mana to play with. You want to be looking for roams onto the side lanes, either bot or top, or even potentially into the jungle to try and mess with them. It really, Ryze is a lot about looking around the map and making things happen on the map. And if you just sit in lane and play Ryze to farm the whole game, generally speaking, that's not going to be the most efficient way to play. And Ryze is so powerful at roaming because not only does he have the ability to push the wave very quickly, but he also has guaranteed CC with his EW, and that allows him to like dive very easily or look for picks really well. So for generally the first 7 to 10 minutes in the game, you want to be looking for roams and making things happen on the map, make the game exciting and fun. I want to talk quickly about Ryze's ultimate. Ryze's ultimate is a very important part of his kit and can really make this champion go from being a whatever split pusher to an extremely powerful force to be reckoned with in all stages of the game. When in the early game you are looking for these roam timings, your ultimate is often going to be the thing that allows your opponent to be out of position. A very good ult spot is about here. Now I'm level 11, so it's going to be longer range, but even if you're not like level 11 Ryze, you're still going to be ult about here or maybe about here. And this is like a really powerful ult angle to get you into dives on top lane. Same thing on bot lane. From about here to here, you can usually get on the level 1 ulti. And that can really catch people out because the extra distance that you move, especially if you have your jungler with you, people will get caught off guard very easily and very often. In the mid game, what you want to be doing with your ultimate is all about how creative you are. This is one of the things that really makes Ryze very fun to play for me, is he really rewards creativity, and thinking outside the box on how you can utilize your ultimate is a big part of that. So if you're in the side lane and looking to roam to mid lane, you could also potentially ult behind the person that's catching the wave with your jungler and catch them out, or you could ult and just dive mid. And you can see clearly, like when you have so many options, like why this champion is so strong in the right hands in pro play. And it's because when he's off vision, you have to respect his ultimate so much, and how powerful his ultimate is really depends on the situation you're in as well as your creativity. very common now play in pro play with Ryze is to ult your whole team to the Baron pit. So there's basically just a big circle around the Baron pit that you can look and sneak people into Baron with. In the very, very late game, that can often mean you ult everyone into the Baron pit and they die, and the Baron dies in like 1 second. And this can win you games. It can change the outcome of an entire team fight. Just be careful ulting in when the enemy is there, because if the enemy team has something like an Orianna, you can kill your whole team doing it. And you just have to get used to it. Sometimes you're gonna have bad ultimates where you go in and die instantly, but I think playing on the edge is part of what makes playing Ryze so much fun. And I think getting off a very good ultimate is very rewarding. In the mid game on Ryze, the most important thing that you have to be doing is pulling people to the side lane. Ryze is so powerful in the side lane. He has a semi-global ultimate, which allows him to quickly move to the other side of the map. And he's also so powerful in a 1v1 because of how much damage and tankiness he has, that pulling the enemy team to the side of the map and roaming up, like proxying, and then roaming to mid lane when the enemy team shows bot lane is quintessential Ryze gameplay. You don't want to just be getting standard team fights on Ryze. He's not that kind of champion. You want to push your lane and then look to roam and potentially look to dive these towers or shift up and look for like this tower maybe. You always want to be abusing the side lane though. You're so powerful in the side lane, especially when you're this tanky build. You beat pretty much everyone 1v1. And even if you don't win against someone in the 1v1, you're so tanky and have so much mobility that you can usually run away at the very least. And Ryze synergizes really well with like every jungler right now. So every 2v2 is almost always going to be winning for Ryze, just because he brings so much CC to the table and tankiness and can pull a lot of pressure from the opponents without dying. In the late game, Ryze's split pushing power heavily depends on what the opposing champions are. He doesn't scale as well as a standard split pusher would. So if the enemy team has like a Camille or a Fiora, he's not going to be able to push like a side lane very aggressively because he loses very hard at that point in the late game. Generally, in the late game on Ryze, you want to be looking for flank angles and coming from different options, looking for different options. If, let's say, there's a dragon coming up that's really important, most mages would just want to come straight from the front and go with the team. But on Ryze, very often the best play is to look for a cheeky angle, come from the side, look for when they're not paying attention, and flash root a carry into Everfrost a carry, and generally that much CC just insta-kills the carry if they don't have like a Zhonya's or something, or a QSS or Cleanse. In the late game, Ryze does not super shine with the tank build, but with the AP build, he does a ton of damage. It really will depend on your playstyle, on how strong Ryze is, and how aggressively you want to push in these side lanes, and how confident you are at pushing these side lanes to determine Ryze's effectiveness in the late game. Ryze combos are pretty intuitive. Your Q gets reset by both your E as well as your W. So pretty much the optimal combo on Ryze is almost always to start with Q and then use your E, Q again, then W, then Q. So quickly that's going to look like this. And then by that time your E is usually back up so you can get another E off. That's like a pretty standard combo. One thing you have to be careful about when you're doing that combo is you don't want to use your E and W together unless you really want the root, because then you're actually losing a Q damage. However, there's actually a really cheeky combo you can go for. If you're really fast, you can actually get the root. Oh, I didn't do it there because I'm bad, but if you're fast, you can actually get the root while also getting all the Qs. So it was hard to see there, but you can, your Q from pretty far away is actually slower travel time than your W after your Q cast. So you can actually input an extra Q while still getting the root. This is probably like the hardest Ryze combo that you can do, but it's really, really efficient because it not only gets you the root, but it also gets you that extra Q that you're missing if you just do Q, E, W, and then Q. So it's just a very slightly more efficient combo, and It's using that in situations, in high pressure situations, will really make Ryze that much stronger. Otherwise, Ryze is a pretty standard champion. The other big mechanic on Ryze is his runes. And if you use 2 basic abilities that aren't Q, so I guess just E and W or E and E, then he gets these little 2 runes. And when you proc them, you get a move speed boost. So the full damage build does not get you any of these runes because you're always putting in a Q in between your basic spells. So if you're chasing somebody or trying to run away, then naturally the high damage combo is not going to be the most efficient. Generally speaking, if you want to start up a fight, you want to start with your EW because that not only CCs them, but also allows you to get the move speed and chase for a better positioning to get more combo spell rotations off. But there is something to be said for WEQ because EWQ does a lot less damage than WEQ because you don't get the flux amplification on your Q. But if the enemy is not CC'd, then you can miss the Q potentially. So it's really a give and take. You have to be thinking about which situation calls for which combo. And that's one of the things that makes Ryze so fun is every team fight is different. You have to think about how you want to be playing the fights every single time. It's not just standard, oh, I press R on this guy and then the fight's the exact same. You have to think about, okay, which spell should I use where and how do I want to position to get the most out of my spells. The other mechanic you have to be careful about is if things are in front of you, you can't actually hit them with Q. And this will like heavily reduce your damage. If I'm trying to kill this far target dummy, then if there's something in front of me, I don't do any damage to it. This is like a very big thing to be paying attention to, and your combo will really change when this is the case. Sometimes it's optimal to use your E not on the person you're hitting so that you can do more damage to the target you're actually going for. But that really heavily depends on obviously what this dummy is. If it's a champion, you might run away. So you have to be careful about your positioning and make sure that if you are looking for a specific target, that your Q is the one that's actually doing damage. Your E doesn't do a lot of damage on Ryze. It's mainly your Q. Overall, Ryze is one of the most fun champions to play in League, in my opinion. He has so much pressure in the early game. He puts a lot of stress on your opponents to play well. And the way his champion works in fights allows him to make a lot of very surprising plays that people are not expecting and turn around fights that look lost. His ultimate is one of the most unique spells in the game. It allows you to move your whole team 3,000 units away, and there's a lot of creative ways you can use that. You can ult in tanks to flank. You can ult in to flank yourself. You can ult in and then stopwatch to bait a bunch of spells. There's just so many things you can do with Ryze ultimate, and I think it makes him such a unique champion, such a fun champion, and very strong if you really know how to pilot him. That was my Ryze champion guide. I hope it was helpful to you. Thank you for watching so much. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.